Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I don't know whether you've picked up on this, if you're kind enough to listen to the programme on a regular basis, that we've had a change of personnel on the other side of the screens, and my old pal Jones the engineer, butt of many jokes and unfair treatment over the years, has sailed. He's been promoted. That's astonishing. And is now a member of the management team. So I don't have his cheery face looking at me every day. I've got a dizzying array of younger, more attractive colleagues now to aim my words at. But Jones said this thing a few years ago that always stayed with me. I told you at the time because we laughed at him, and then over the years I've had to apologise because he made a brilliant point, albeit unintentionally, when he said after the prime ministerial debates in 2010, I said, what do you think? Who do you think came out on top? He goes, to be honest with you, James, I'm not quite sure who did best because the audience weren't allowed to clap. And I went, oh, you prune. And then I thought about it afterwards, and I thought, do you know what? Yeah, you're right. It's kind of hard to know who's winning if the crowd isn't allowed to respond. It's kind of... I know that you could probably break it down logically, but because rhetoric and speech are as much about emotion and delivery as they are about content and fact, it was quite strange. And I find myself in that position sometimes with news stories. There is a tendency, since Twitter in particular became so popular, there is a tendency to see conspiracies everywhere and to see media bias everywhere. Everyone thinks the media is biased. Absolutely everybody I've ever met thinks the media is biased against their worldview. Not absolutely everybody, of course not. But you know what I mean. If we discuss the Middle East, we'll get accused of being Zionist shills as much as we'll get accused of being Islamist apologists. So it's actually hilarious when you can step back from it from a moment to see how similar the accusers actually are. But sometimes, without widespread media coverage, I find it hard to get a handle on stuff. And when people say the fact that this isn't being covered more widely in the media is outrageous, it's proof that there's bias, it's proof that there's a conspiracy, I usually jog on. I usually move along. But occasionally I do look at these stories and think to myself, do you know what? I don't really understand why this isn't getting more coverage. I don't really understand why this politician isn't getting a tougher ride. There is a Conservative MP called Lucy Allan. She voted to bomb Syria. That's pertinent to what follows. And she went on Facebook to complain about the abuse she was getting. Let me read you what she wrote on Facebook, okay? And the question that's going to pop up, if you can answer it already because you're across the story and you don't need to... So if you're across the Lucy Allan story already and you want to tell me whether or not you think this is a bigger deal than perhaps the rest of the media is allowing, then you can call now and book your place. There are phone lines free. Apologies to everybody waiting. I gave as many people as I could a chance. So this is Lucy Allan, a Conservative MP, posting on Facebook. She writes, MPs get a lot of abuse online. Mostly I just take it. That just normalises it and makes it acceptable, which it isn't. So starting today, I will publish it. You have been warned. This is from Rusty from Dawley. Look, I know that you're just a robot, or at least a person so detached from reality that you have no empathy for anyone but your super rich buddies and benefactors. But at one point you must have felt some kind of emotion towards other people, unless you've gone full Cameron, rendering you an empty shell of a human being containing nothing but pure venom and spite for anyone worse off than you, in which case there is no hope unless you die. And she posted that on Facebook, and presumably expected to get a lot of sympathy and support as a result. Sympathy and support, which she probably would have deserved, because that line there, those three words at the end, unless you die, are repellent, right? That's disgraceful. It's suggesting that the only context in which this correspondent can see hope is as if this poor woman dies. You can see why she did it, can't you, yeah? Yeah. Except the person who sent her that message didn't write the words unless you die, she did. She put them on the end of this post herself. She has subsequently claimed that they were contained in a message she got from someone else, and she decided to elide the two together. She hasn't explained why they're contained within quotation marks. So this gentleman, Rusty Shackelford, which cartoon fans will know is a pseudonym, got in touch and said, "You added the bit where it says, 'unless you die.' I never wrote that. I never would wish death on anyone, even a soulless Tory liar such as yourself." His real name is Adam Watling. He's son of a Labour councillor and a political activist. Also a contender, looking at his picture here. The Mail Online, of all places, have covered this. As far as I can tell, nobody else really has. He's also a contender for Beard of the Year. I haven't been able to get hold of Adam. If you know him, can you get him to give me a ring on 0345 6060973? That's the problem with using pseudonyms. Rusty Shackelford. He came forward and said he never did that. I think this is huge, personally. I would think it was huge if it was a Labour MP. I want to make that absolutely clear as well. Or a Liberal Democrat. There's still any left? There are a few, aren't there? There's a few Liberal Democrats still around the place. Or if it was an SNP, whoever it was. So then she responded. She took down the post. Fairly soon after, Mr. Watling pointed out that she was, to my mind, and certainly to his, lying through her teeth. Took that down and now wrote, "I posted actual comments made to me on the same day, although not in the same email. Comments were added to the post as they came in. I posted them to show examples of the type of unacceptable online abuse that comes in most days and that most people tolerate silently. The comments were not posted to discredit any individual. Rusty could have been anyone or a wholly fictional person. He chose to identify himself and came forward with a surname. At that point, I took the post down." Listen, I'm allowed to say pretty much what I want about politicians on this programme, unless there's a by-election underway, and there aren't any by-elections today. I think she's lying through her teeth. I cannot conceive of any circumstances in which she would think that was a plausible explanation of sticking on Facebook 6 lines that somebody sent her, and then 3 words underneath that logically work and make it look like he's wishing death upon her, but which apparently came from a completely different text or email or Facebook post that she has conveniently failed to provide to the public. I want to see it, Mrs. Allan. I want to see this, because it might have said, "Dear Lucy Allan, I will definitely vote for you in the next election. I think you're magnificent. I think you're the most wonderful MP I've ever seen in my whole life ever. And I'll definitely vote for you at the next general election. Oh, unless you die." In which case, of course, you wouldn't be. What would "unless you die" be? Where would that fit into an email when you take it out of context? I'll definitely see you next week at the ministerial surgery, at the constituency surgery. Oh, unless you die, of course, in which case or unless I die. The only circumstances in which I won't cast my vote for you at the next general election is if you die. Okay, calm down. How big a deal is this? So it's an elected representative. It's a member of our parliament going on to a public platform, and, well, of course, she may well produce the email in which the phrase "unless you die" appears in context and looks as unpleasant as she suggests it is. And if she does, I will absolutely apologise for saying that, to me, it looks as though right now she's lying through her teeth. And when MPs lie through their teeth in the current political climate, if they're members of the Labour Party, they tend to get crucified, castigated, hauled over the coals. Why do you think this story, quite possibly, this is the first you've heard of it? Now, I've got a problem now. Because when we pick a subject built upon a story that hasn't received widespread media coverage, historically it doesn't actually lend itself to radio phone-ins. I won't bore you with the details, but sometimes you'll hear us doing a story on the radio that actually broke 24 hours ago. And the reason is, and I learned this from a couple of my colleagues who've been doing it longer than I have, the reason is that we all need a little bit of time to absorb news before we actually formulate or foment an opinion about it. If I started a phone-in on something that had literally just broken, it would, unless you were ringing to provide eyewitness testimony or explanations or accounts, it wouldn't work. Usually we need at least a few hours just to let the dust settle. So I'm going all in on this, conscious of the fact that it might be a very lonely experience. If you're not just right this minute learning about this story involving Lucy Allan, you kind of owe me a favour. I'd love you to ring in. But equally, if I've now explained it as well as I can, she added these 3 words and complained about abuse, which could have been dressed up as a form of death threat, and has subsequently claimed that they came from another communication, which she has not provided. The gentleman who sent the original email, absolutely adamant that what she's done is outrageous. And I think he's right. I think he says, I think this is deceitful and it calls into question her integrity. She says that Scotland Yard is investigating correspondence sent to her from various people and alleged that she is being harassed. If that's true, nothing about it except sympathy, no response except support. But to put an email on Facebook claiming it's from an individual, identified, she didn't know at the time it was a pseudonym, and adding the 3 words "unless you die" at the end, I think it's possibly even a criminal act, isn't it? I mean, if Rusty from Dawley had been more easily identifiable, it would be libelous. But maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I don't know, seeing what I want to see. Usually, when you tell me that the media is ignoring a story, and hopefully I'll be the one that talks about it, and then I look at the story, I'm not going to lie to you, I completely understand why the media has ignored it. Sometimes it will be contempt of court. A lot of cab drivers getting in touch with me this morning claiming that we should be covering an element of a recent story more comprehensively than we are. That's contempt of court if charges have been brought against someone. Claiming that there's a conspiracy somewhere, and then I look into it and it turns out that actually there's not a conspiracy at all, there's just an unattributed quote on a website somewhere that turns out not to be true. So I generally believe you when you tell me that you think something deserves more attention, and I hope that you trust me when I say I look at it and I realise why, I understand why it's not getting more attention. But this could be the stopped clock moment. This is the one that I've received the most communications about in the last few days, saying, why aren't you doing this? And on my personal Twitter as well as at work, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing this? Why isn't this getting more coverage? And I don't know why. I don't know why. And the only answer I've got, to employ that lovely Sherlock Holmes quote that we wheel out on an almost daily basis on this programme, is that there is some form of bias going on here. Once you've eliminated the impossible, whatever you are left with, however improbable, must be the truth. I believe that if a Labour MP was busted behaving in this way, most of the mainstream newspapers would have gone to town on it. She's a Conservative MP. Why has this story not received wider coverage? Why has an MP taken to Facebook to, it would appear, fib through her teeth about something as serious as death threats in the context of a terrorism crisis? People are being arrested for making threats to MPs. Why do you think this story hasn't received broader broadcast? And if your answer involves me being stupid, I'm old enough and ugly enough to take it. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. She has added words to an email to make it look like a form of death threat. The person who sent the email did not mention death in any way, shape or form. I think at best that's reprehensible. At worst it's a sackable offence. But hey, you might see things differently.
James O'Brien, weekdays 10 till 1 on LBC.
It's 11:53. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the conversation is a strange one and a probably slightly risky one from my point of view, but it's fine. It's a story that I think deserves a lot more coverage than it's getting. But of course, when you say that on the radio, you cast yourself as a critic of your colleagues, not here necessarily, but elsewhere as well, and so colleagues in journalism. An MP posted an email to show how she had been threatened over Syria. She gave no indication on her Facebook post that it was anything other than a message from someone called Rusty from Dawley, except that Rusty himself produced a copy of the email that he'd sent, and it did not contain the words "unless you die." She added them. The only mystery here is why. She says it was because those 3 words, "unless you die," came from another email that she received later that day, and she decided to conflate the two to make her point more powerfully. That, to me, is right up there with the dog eating your homework. It really is, or a big boy doing it and running away, or postal fraud in Oldham. It's so spurious and ridiculous an excuse that you know, or at least you strongly suspect the person offering it up is being economical with the truth. What do you think? That's all. 03, and I know this is going to sound a bit odd, but you're guaranteed to get through during this conversation, because anything that involves me telling you about stuff you haven't heard of before and then asking me what you think about it kind of breaks all the rules of phone-in radio. Fred's in Nottinghamshire, in Retford. Fred, what do you reckon?
Hi, James. Yeah, you are right. It's the first time I've managed to get through to you, so there you go.
Well, there you go. I'm glad you've broken your duck.
But I suppose that's the caveat of dealing with this issue. I mean, at the moment, we don't know the full facts, and I don't want to know... Well, normally I'm not one to jump the gun.
Sure.
But I do feel at the very least, Conservative and, you know, maybe some more of the sort of media, the BBC at least.
Well, go with the facts that you do know. So, I mean, for me, the salient fact here is that she has admitted adding the words, but in the original post, there was no... she said, this is from Rusty from Dawley. She did not say, this is from a selection of abusers, this is from a selection of correspondence. She said, this is from one person, and she made it look like a death threat when it wasn't.
I mean, in that instance, yes, she has essentially falsified a death threat in that correspondence from that constituency herself. Whether or not she's received any other death threats and is conflating it is a separate issue. But on that one email that she's posted and then presumably doctored or edited to infer that this Rusty fella...
Yes?
Yeah, embellished. Getting out my thesaurus there. You know, that in itself is dodgy and suspicious, and I just feel like at the very least, the bare minimum is that the Conservative Party would want to investigate that, and I don't know if they're doing that, but I would hope they were. I think the constituents of Telford would want her to at least, and I mean at least, receive a sort of symbolic slap on the wrist at the very worst. I mean, I'm not sure what the procedures are, but, you know, I think if she's proved to be lying, that doesn't, you know, bode well, does it really?
I wouldn't have thought so. So I know, obviously, you're far too sensible to indulge me too much, but do you see any kind of political bias in place here? If it was a Labour MP, do you think that we'd be going to town?
Well, I think when I don't think there's a sort of direct bias. I think it's more sort of a tacit thing. You know, it's the BBC, for example. Everybody always goes, "Oh, the BBC's biased."
Yeah.
Well, it's not really, but it kind of is. It always just wants to go with the status quo and go with the flow, and it will comment on things, but, you know, it has to walk that line between being by one side of the political spectrum being called, oh, you're biased to the left, you're biased to the left, and the other side, oh, you're biased to the right.
Yes.
The BBC will always be seen as biased to somebody. It's it's walking a tightrope, really. But, I mean, I think there is a little bit of that, because if this was a Labour MP or a Labour, even a Labour activist, I mean, there was that guy, Andrew Fisher, a few weeks ago. The media was on that, like, you know, under the microscope for some...
She's not very well known. She's not very well known. She's not close to Cameron or anything like that.
Neither was Andrew Fisher. I mean,
no, but he was close to Corbyn. He was. They were using him to get to Corbyn. So if she was close to Cameron as opposed to just a member of Parliament, I don't know. There's any way of establishing for certain whether or not a relatively obscure Labour MP from Shropshire would get the same sort of treatment or the same sort of free pass. The BBC in their defence have done the story, but they've filed it under England regions rather than under politics, which was strange.
Yeah, well, I think it just sort of it's more of a symbolic thing, if anything, that an MP would, if she, you know, I mean, again, it's all kind of alleged at the moment, and we don't want to sort of put our hands in the cement and leave it. You know what I mean? And
yes, of course.
If it's proved to be true, it's quite serious, because that's a lie, and we don't want our MPs to lie. And at the bare minimum, they shouldn't smear their constituents to imply one of them has given them a death threat. But I must stress again, whether or not she's received other death threats is a separate issue from editing an email to imply that constituency.
Well, I think she has lied already. Personally, I appreciate you're far too diplomatic.
Well, I've studied law, and I don't want to be sued for.
No, that's absolutely fine. But I think that the original post was a lie when she put "this is from Rusty from Dawley," and then her defence of it is that actually it wasn't. So that's a lie.
Well, I've seen print screens of the email, and someone's highlighted it. The bit that she's added on, and I know what you mean, James. Yeah,
that's there. It's in front of me now. I'm looking at this is from Rusty from Dawley, and then when Rusty from Dawley said I never said that, she goes, oh no, that was someone else. But it's all filed under this is from Rusty from Dawley. Fred, don't get your hopes up. It'll get back to being very difficult to get through, I'm sure, once we've parked Mrs. Allan. More of your thoughts on this, please. Jay, you know, listening to me and Fred and I. Me and Fred, I was right the first time. You might feel your thoughts crystallising. I would quite like someone to give me a cold shower and actually say, no, James, listen, mate, this is not the story you think it is. It might well be causing a right old bonfire on Twitter or a right old rumpus on social media, but let me tell you why it's not as big a deal as you are currently suspecting. We have a story that's received next to no coverage from the so-called mainstream media, and yet which on social media has prompted something of a brouhaha, something of a furore. There's a proper sort of buzz surrounding it. It is, however, a buzz that is coming from the left. I think that's fair to say, because it's a story that involves an MP from the right. Having said that, a couple of my UKIP friends have been in touch on Twitter to actually say that she should resign. So make of it what you will. What I want you to tell me is simply whether or not you think this story is important. It's a story about a Conservative MP claiming on Facebook that a message she posted had been received from an individual, except the individual said he never wrote the last 3 words, which moved it from constructive criticism, albeit mildly abusive criticism, into a death wish, if not a death threat. It's an important distinction, that. A death wish, in which case there is no hope unless you die. But her correspondent didn't write the words "unless you die." I've got that feeling in my tummy like we had during the expenses scandal. Like an MP is asking to be judged by a different moral code that they expect the rest of us to follow. I've got that feeling. It could be misplaced. You could douse it for me by 12:15. But right now, this looks to me like the worst example of political entitlement that we've seen in quite a while. Quite a while. I know that Rusty Shackelford is an alias. I did say at the outset, the cartoon fans will know that it's a pseudonym. It's King of the Hill, isn't it? I think it is. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is this. She claimed it came from one person. It didn't. She subsequently claimed it came from 2 people. She hasn't proved it. And the insertion of those words, "unless you die" at the end of it, constitute a lie, because she wrote "this is from Rusty from Dawley," and then her defence for deceiving her followers on Facebook was, well, actually it wasn't. Now, that is a lie. That is deceitful, deceptive and dishonest. But is it a big deal to you as a voter? 0345 6060973. See what we're doing on social media. Jay in Harrow will be up first. After Jay, it could be you. Why is this story not getting more coverage? She's now deleted her Facebook, I'm told, and all of her social media on the grounds of it being distracting. Ian finally is playing the game. He's come in with a 7 or an 8 on this, James, as to how big a deal it really is. The simple tweet that we've posted describing the story we're discussing has been retweeted more than anything else that we've done for a couple of weeks, just in the space of the last 10 minutes. So the feeling is out there, but I'm not 100% confident I could explain to you, apart from using words like deceit and deceiving, why it deserves more coverage, why it's a bigger story than the rest of the media currently allows. Kevin's close. She accused an innocent man of making threats which proved false. He could easily have been arrested because of her lies. I think that distinction between death wish and death threat may have prevented that situation from coming about. But I have to tell you that a woman yesterday was sentenced to a suspended prison sentence, wasn't she? And that was for lying about a security guard taking her baby off her in a branch of Primark. So we could do it like that if you want. What's the difference between going on Facebook to tell a lie about a constituent who's written to you, or going to a newspaper to tell a lie about a security guard who you accuse of taking your baby off you for breastfeeding? She got a suspended prison sentence yesterday. Quite a few of you are drawing attention to that story. Again, I've got this weird lack of confidence, and I don't know why. Lack of confidence that you're right. I think you are. I feel you are. It feels bigger. But I'm a son of a journalist. I'm steeped in newspaper coverage, newspaper culture, and part of me thinks, no, this is an appalling admission, but I've made it to you before. I'm not going to lie to you. I never do. If the newspapers aren't going mad for it, there's part of me that says it can't be a very big story. So why do you think the newspapers aren't going mad for this? 0345 6060973. Another Ian. The issue is big. It's a lie from an elected MP in a slim majority seat. The BBC's nominal coverage indicates bias. It really doesn't. I do some work at the BBC now, and I promise you, it's the one place I've ever worked where impartiality is a complete given. But of course, people on all sides of all arguments are absolutely persuaded that they're biased against them. Says Davis, she should show some humility instead of the sneering dismissal. Death threats are serious for some. Seems like they might be a game for others. And Adrian says, it is also a very stark example of an MP misrepresenting their constituents. If the party do nothing, they share her disgrace. Nobody, yep, another one, Visha, surely this is going against a code of conduct. She's made a serious false accusation against a man. It could have led to a police case. A few of you are pointing out that if his name was Mohammed rather than the pseudonym Rusty Shackelford, he might have expected to have his collar felt. Still more of you are pointing out that yesterday a woman received a suspended prison sentence for telling lies about a security guard in Primark. How is this different? Dave in Chichester says it's right up there with falsely accusing someone of rape. It's disgusting. The man could have ended up with a criminal record. Only if he couldn't prove that it was a lie, and he could have proved that very, very easily. Good argument for sacking, plus slim majority, plus lack of coverage, plus social media furore equals big story, especially if that by-election would deliver another Labour victory. And someone did get arrested the other day for making a death threat to an MP. Strange. I was wrong earlier it was last week, wasn't it, on this Tory bullying scandal. Sam in Red Hill, you see, I can even remember his name, such is my gift for self-flagellation. And he was going, you should do more on this, you should do more on this. And I said, I can't do more on it, because it's not a topic, it's a story. There's a difference between something that appears in the bulletin and something we can chew the fat about together. And my colleague Ian Dale has been leading the field on the coverage of this Tory bullying scandal, and quite rightly so, but you do it as a story. You don't open up the phone lines because nobody's going to disagree with you. Bullying is awful. I think I called it wrong. I'm trying to call it right today. Still doesn't mean necessarily that you want to pile in and tell me what you think, but if you do, you know what to do. Jay's in Harrow. Jay, what's going on?
Well, Brian, thank you for taking my call.
Eventually. Thank you for not adding eventually at the end of that.
No, not at all, not at all. I mean, this is epic. I mean, the police could have gone around and arrested this man for the highest threat possible, which is threats to kill. Worse still, malicious communication. And this man will be lagging now with a criminal conviction.
I don't know that it would have come to that, because he could quite easily have shown them the message that he actually sent. You can conceive of circumstances in which he would have got arrested. I can't imagine it would have stayed that way for very long when he said, no, here you go, here's my email account. Look, I never sent her that at all. But she said that he did. And that...
But James, the reality of it is, and I know of circumstances where this has happened, where the police have done a knee-jerk reaction,
yes,
have arrested, the person's arrested, they've got a crime record, yeah, albeit they're not being convicted. Now, if you go for a job in this day and age, and the employer will say to you, have you ever been arrested by the police? And you say yes, straight away. There you are, you're black marked.
You said, do you have a criminal record? You're not going to own up to having been arrested if you haven't been convicted, are you?
Sorry?
You're not going to own up to being arrested if you've never been convicted. It wouldn't come up on a CRB chat. I think we might be veering slightly from the...
No, it will be. It will do. And depending on the type of job you go for, it will come up that you have been arrested for such offence.
Okay,
like
hand on heart. Don't go...
You're working with people.
Don't go tinfoil hat on me. Why has it not got more coverage?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe because of who she is. I really don't know. I honestly can't answer that question. But I think it's sad that someone of that, in that position, can do something so callous and then turn it around to say, well, I added this bit to give a show that this is what's happening. It's wrong. It's wrong by every stretch of the imagination. It's wrong. It's wrong. She knows what she's doing. She's not a stupid woman.
That's why she's deleted all of her social media accounts. So she might be worried that other stuff is going to emerge. We shall see. Jay, mind how you go. Quite loads of messages coming in via text and email. All at the moment, I think, are absolutely four square behind the idea that not only does she have a case to answer, she probably has a resignation issue on her hand. This is from someone who describes himself or herself as a Tory voter in Hove. The vast majority of MPs mislead, fib and cloud the truth all the time, James, but this MP has crossed a line in accusing a member of the public of something serious. She should resign and a by-election should be held. That's a Tory voter in Hove. Among... President, I'm just getting these right. I've had a text. It's all about Donald Trump, actually, still. Donald Trump is a righteous, blind man, which may have been echoed throughout history, so thanks for that. Let's get on to David, who's in Reading. David, what's going on with this story?
James, it's all your fault.
Is it?
Yeah.
Most things are.
Okay, not specifically.
Most things
probably, but the media. And at this point, I should say that my friend Steve in Telford is probably spitting his lunch out, because I just tweeted him and said I was going to go on the radio.
Hi, Steve.
We're friends across the nation, but I'm sort of more leaning towards Labour, and he's definitely Conservative.
Is she his MP?
But sorry,
she's probably his MP.
She is.
Yeah.
But the thing, I'm surprised. The reason I'm ringing in is I'm surprised I'm not more upset or jumping for joy about this story. But I think what I thought about is that I'm just numb to it. Yeah. I mean, we as a nation are just numb to all these stories. Have we got
that clip from when Sheila Fogarty was broadcasting from Westminster Green? Because I know why you're numb to it. Okay, but you mean the politicians are liars? It's just a given. Why are we? It's like being shocked that the Pope's a Catholic.
And also with the social media stuff, James, it's just churning out every second. You know, all these things that you've talked about, the bullying scandal, the David Cameron with Lord Ashcroft, or are we just getting numb and used, just like human nature? The more you see stuff and the more you get it, you just go, yeah, whatever.
You do, David. Your cynicism has now ossified to a degree that has stopped your thought processes. But some of us are still fighting the good fight, my friend, on your behalf. I will get outraged so that you don't have to.
You're probably right, but I just want, that's the question I wanted to dip into the bigger story. Is are we just getting, between the politicians, the media, the public, and we're all throwing these stories. It's like I don't know. This is different. I think I recognise the trend that you're describing and the tidal wave it sometimes seems of similar stories, but this is different because she did it herself, because she did it publicly, and because she did it so unapologetically. This is from Rusty from Dawley. Oh, except the bit at the end that actually makes it look like he's wishing death upon her. That wasn't from him at all. That was from someone completely different in an email that had absolutely nothing to do with the one that I said was from... surely at some point, how long do I have to keep talking before you feel the rage rise, David? I'm putting on my T-shirt with the word allegedly written in big letters across it. So
none of that's...
wearing the allegedly.
None of that's allegedly. None of that is allegedly.
But, she may have dipped in, and like we all do, you remember being at school...
I'm not an MP! I'm allowed to be a bit of a prune on social media. She's a member of Parliament talking about a constituent. What does Steve think?
I haven't. I'm rattling the mouse. I haven't seen a reply yet.
I bet he's on my side. It's a strange conversation, the one that you join us in the middle of, because it is an attempt to identify whether a story receiving very little coverage should have been receiving more, and further, whether or not you feel that Lucy Allan, about whom this story is, an MP for Telford, Conservative MP for Telford, has done something worthy of at least calls for her resignation. There is astonishing almost unanimity coming into the studio via text, Twitter and email, suggesting that there is a widespread belief that she's crossed some sort of line that, even by the standards of politicians, and of course those standards are best summed up by that heckler who plagued Sheila Fogarty's life earlier this year.
Politicians are liars! Politicians are liars!
Him obviously reflecting a sense of cynicism that perhaps explains why we don't get our knickers in more of a twist when we find such incontrovertible evidence of it actually happening under our noses. But if we don't go all in on it, we can't really sit here complaining about other people not going all in on it. What do you think? I'd like somebody to pour cold water on it. Just explain to me why. David tried, but he was effectively saying, oh, they're all wrong-uns. Why get your knickers in a twist about another one? And that's not good enough. I want you to tell me why this isn't a big deal, why she isn't actually, or why she shouldn't be facing any calls for her resignation. The numbers are 0345 6060 973. Matt's in Woodford. Matt, am I getting a bit overexcited here?
I'm afraid not, James. Absolutely not. I can't be the one to throw your proverbial cold water over you either, I'm afraid.
Well, go on then. What do you think's going on here?
Well, I think as you said very eloquently, and lots of others have also said, I haven't really got a huge amount to add, I'm afraid, but I do think that it's just another sign of the times, isn't it? It's another symptom of a sort of wider problem. You know, you can even draw sort of parallels between this and the whole sort of terrorist sympathisers stuff that Cameron was saying, and then refused to apologise for. But people aren't holding themselves to account or being held to account in any strong way.
It's as if the rules of engagement are changing slightly, isn't it? I mean, you could attribute it to any number of things, but we've watched some politicians stand up in public recently and just tell egregious lies and exaggerations on both sides of the Atlantic. We were talking about Donald Trump in the last hour, but of course Farage's comments after Oldham about the Guardian writing about streets of people, or a whole street of people where no one spoke English, just a straight barefaced lie. Not as big a lie as the one he told about me in his last book, but still just lies. And then normal politicians who aren't extremists or freaks sort of think, maybe even subconsciously, do you know what, maybe I'm a bit too honest, maybe I don't need to start telling the truth, maybe I can sort of just push the envelope a little bit further than I have done previously.
Well, exactly, it sets a precedent, doesn't it? And if that's what the leaders are doing, then why wouldn't the sort of lower rank members be following suit? Of course they're going to. If that's the way to get ahead, if that's the way to maintain your position. I mean, similar things were happening with the so-called sort of protests going on at Stella Creasy's constituency, where they were made out to be outside of her house and so on, and there was all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, although that was just one person on social media whose photograph got picked up by people like Diane Abbott, and then people like me sort of thought it was kosher because of the people that were retweeting it. As it turned out, that protest was very much confined to her constituency office. Is it? I mean, I know you're not going to throw cold water at me, but you might just sprinkle me with a bit. When everybody writes in, and loads of people are making this point, the woman who got sentenced yesterday for lying about a security guard in Primark taking her baby off her. Obviously she would have lied to a court, or she would have lied to the police, which isn't quite the same. But a lie is a lie, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. Certainly in my job, if I lie, then I will certainly be held accountable to it.
Yeah, if you go on Facebook and say, this is from James O'Brien, oh, Matt, I really love you and I want to have all your babies, and then I got in touch with your employer and said, I never wrote that. I said, I really love you, I want to have lunch with you. Then you'd get into trouble, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to have your babies necessarily, mate, but I'm always free for a sandwich. It's 27 minutes after 12. 0345 6060 973. I presume that you're responding, Leslie, to this on Twitter rather than actually listening to the radio show when you ask, how would you be reporting this if it was a UKIP MP who had done this, I wonder? Well, I mean, calling for their resignation and describing it as appalling behaviour, I think would pretty much cover it, wouldn't it? If it was a Labour MP as well, I'd be saying, why is this story? She or he has lied to everybody who can access that Facebook post. We have phoned, by the way, but she's deleted her Facebook account, she's deleted her Twitter account, and they're not answering the phone at the House of Commons. It's not like we pay her wages, is it? Or anything like that. If you're in Shropshire, if you're in the constituency, she's relatively new to you. I think she's only been in post since May, since the general election. Very small majority, very vulnerable to the post-Oldham Corbyn surge. Maybe that explains why. But again, I know you think I'm very naive when I tell you this. Journalists like making mischief even more than they like making friends with powerful people. So there is no way that newspapers, it's the Mail Online that have published this story. There's no way anyone's taken a phone call from central office where they've said, oh, can you make sure you don't run this story? Can you make sure you don't go big with it? Unless, of course, I just never got high enough up the ladder on Fleet Street to be the sort of person who took those calls. But I honestly don't think they have that power. If you phoned up someone like the political editor of the Mail on Sunday, Simon Walters, an old pal of mine, old mentor of mine, superb journalist, leading the field at the moment on the coverage of the Tory bullying scandal, the one that left the young man dead and that remains far, far, far from complete. Tune into Ian Dale later this afternoon for more, every day this week for more on that story. I tell you now, categorically, that There's no earthly way journalists like that are susceptible to influence or persuasion. So I suppose I need to ask them. I need to ask some of my friends on the parliamentary side of things why they think this story isn't getting more coverage. 0345 606 0973 is the number you need. In the meantime, I'm asking you, is it a resignation issue for you? Is it something that you see as being a particularly poor performance, a particularly poor act? And if so, why do you think it's not getting the brouhaha that I think it probably would have got if this had been somebody who was allied to Jeremy Corbyn, or somebody whose head had appeared above the parapet since the last general election as a result of all the changes within the Labour Party? Or, of course, if it had been a UKIP MP or a UKIP councillor, it would be getting a lot more coverage. And I guess I just must be either wrong or still confused as to why. Which would you pick? Maybe they're just not waking up yet. Maybe they're still asleep. I'm just sort of thinking of political journalist friends of mine that we could give a ring and ask why this story's not getting more coverage. Because judging by your reaction to it just on this morning's performance, it's unbelievable. Everyone's gone absolutely nuts for this story. And it's an astonishing sense of unanimity as well from people right across the political spectrum. Once I'd explained to you what she has done, then it would appear hardly anybody has got a word of defence to say. We're talking about Lucy Allan, Conservative MP for Telford. She squeaked in May. She stuck an email on Facebook. She's a chartered accountant, former fund manager, so she knows how the world works. It's not as if she's arrived in politics newly minted from the teddy bear factory. And she stuck on Facebook, under the line, this is from a constituent, this is from Rusty in Dawlish or wherever, and then put the full extent of his email, but added at the end, unless you die. And it made logical sense. This is what makes my antennae twitch so violently. He ended with, there is no hope. The email she posted ended with, there is no hope unless you die. He didn't write those words. He has proved it. She has accepted it. She has claimed that what she actually did was elide two separate communications from two separate constituents, which, for reasons she hasn't explained, she elected to stick on Facebook as if they were from the same person. She's effectively asking you and me to believe it's a complete coincidence that those two lines slotted together so symmetrically. There is no hope unless you die. It's just a complete coincidence that it wasn't there is no hope. Tomatoes are £7 a bag at the moment. You see what I mean? That there is no hope unless you die. A complete coincidence that delivers an actual and distinct meaning to proceedings. There is no hope unless you die. Absolutely no intention of suggesting that the bloke who said there was no hope was also suggesting things might be better if I died. No suggestion of that was absolute. Do you know, the more I talk about this, the fouler the stench becomes, doesn't it? I said to you about half an hour ago, I got that feeling in my tummy that I haven't had for years when we were talking about MPs' expenses. I don't know why. Everyone lies, everyone cheats. Mikey in Hackney says everyone's a bigot in some way. The trick is not to get caught. She got caught, she should resign. And I think when it's MPs, you really feel that the rules should be more rigorous than they are for the rest of us, not less rigorous. She voted to bomb Syria. Ethically, her conduct here is questionable. Her judgment is pretty poor, and her attempts to wriggle off the hook are downright ugly. If she's allowed to vote to bomb Syrians and simultaneously tell lies about constituents, is it really any wonder that public trust in politicians is at an all-time low? I've got some phone lines free, and I will have phone lines free till 1 o'clock on this. 0345 6060 973. I'd love to hear a defending voice, someone to say it's not as big a deal. Alison's in Crawley. Alison, what would you like to say?
I'm sorry, James, I'm not that voice.
I don't think we're going to find one. It's weird, this. I mean, I've got Conservatives queuing up saying, you're absolutely right, James. Please don't use it as a stick with which to beat the whole party. This is one individual doing one individual bad act. And I can go along with that. That's fine. I agree.
Well, she's achieved one thing, which is for me to say the Daily Mail's got it right in reporting it. It was very rare that I would say the Daily Mail's got much right.
Mail Online, two very different beasts.
The Mail Online, then.
Yes.
But I really, why has she done it? Why has she told the lie? To, garner sympathy for herself. So she's exposed one of her constituents to a lot of trouble. I agree with you, it probably wouldn't have proceeded to court, but nevertheless, a lot of hassle and a lot of trouble just to garner sympathy for herself. And she's been caught. So, bye-bye. Time to go.
You would think so.
Appalling. Is that just a no-brainer? Well, I don't know why she hasn't gone, actually.
Well, give me your theory. Give me your theory.
I imagine, because it hasn't got much media coverage, she's kind of hoping she can keep her head down and it'll all just die away and she can get away with it.
I like that, because you're not going down the conspiracy route. It is just she's got her fingers crossed, and because things do blow over. Something can pop up, a bridge can... So I have to be careful what I say, actually, because given the state of the weather and the terror situation, if I use a figure of speech to describe an epic news event unfolding, it could happen in the next 10 minutes.
Try and take a Lucas, James.
Aliens could land. I think we're safe on that one, right? Aliens could land and it'd knock it off the... it's not even on the front. It's not on the back page, the middle page. It's not even filed under the horoscopes. But she's just sitting still, knowing she's done something heinous and hoping it goes away, because that is probably why she's deleted all her social media and isn't answering the phone at the House of Commons as well.
Absolutely, and someone needs to ask David Cameron what he thinks about it, and pretty... much. If it gets to Cameron, she's got no hope. That'll be that.
I guess it gets overshadowed by the bullying scandal that's unfolding within the youth wing of the party at the moment as well. I make this clear, actually, for the time being. I won't be able to keep it up for long. No point scoring here politically. No, there's simply one MP. Don't care what party she belongs to. What do you think of this story? Jason is in Watford. Jason, what have you got?
Yeah, hiya, mate. It's quite simple why it's not in there. It's because there's just so much going on at the moment with all the floods in the country and the...
Brilliant. All right, wait here.
Chap that got stabbed.
Yeah, wait here. Wait, stay there. I'm going to read you some stories from the front page of the Daily Telegraph. You tell me which ones you think are more important than an MP lying about a constituent in the context of a death threat, all right?
Yeah.
Andrew Lloyd Webber has admitted he'd almost forgotten what it is like to have a hit as his new musical opened in New York.
I see what you're saying. I haven't
finished. A rundown Liverpool housing estate has been crowned the winner of the Turner Prize.
Yeah, you can. I can see what you're saying. But it's just...
Hang on, I've got another one for you. Eating rare steak.
Are they on the front page?
Yeah, they're all on the front page.
Or are they just links to what's in the paper?
Both.
I would much rather it be on there. MP has resigned over this, not the whole thing that's happened, or the Conservatives have finally taken a stand against rogue MPs and.
Yeah, well, so would I. But I'm just dismantling your theory that it's been overshadowed by more important news. Do you want the big story in the basement of the front page of the Daily Telegraph?
Well, obviously, Andrew Lloyd Webber's far more important than the man that got stabbed on the underground.
No, he's there as well. But eating rare steak and undercooked meats could put diners at risk of contracting superbugs.
But all that boils down to you can't have too many doom and gloom. You've got to have some littler stories. But she's sort of in the middle. She's not a catastrophe, but she's not minor.
It's not.
That would explain. Like a middle ground.
I'm shouting. I apologise. It's the mood I'm in. It's your fault. It's your fault.
I talk loudly myself. I do apologise.
So that's what's happening. I'm copying you. I'm raising my volume to meet yours.
That's what it is. It's because she's a middle ground. What she's done is bad. I'm not saying it's not bad. I'm not saying she shouldn't get kicked out of the party for it. Because, like you say, at the end of the day, the man's... If I was him, I would be taking her to court for libel. Because she's saying that he said something that he never said.
I think her lawyers would probably point out that you can't libel Rusty Shackelford, which was the pseudonym he used, but she didn't know that when she actually did this. And I think your point would work if the story was on page 7 or 8. If the story was on page 9 or 10, you could say that's why it's not getting more coverage, James. My question is, why isn't it getting any? To which you respond by saying it is now. Annie's in Carforth. Annie, what do you think's going on here?
Well, I agree with you. I don't think there's somebody from Conservative Central Office saying, go easy on this one, boys. I'm quite sure.
You do the opposite. You do the opposite. Even journalists with whose politics I passionately disagree. We all hate being told what to do, and we all do the opposite of what politicians. Well, most of us.
Yeah, I just think that a lot of the media has a right-wing bias anyway, and they don't really need that. You know what I mean? It's almost like, well, I'm not even self-censorship because they're not censoring themselves. I just think a lot of the print media particularly are very right-wing, and they just probably don't want to make trouble for the Tories. Whereas if this was anything to do with Jeremy Corbyn or anything to do with the Labour Party, actually, they'd be on it like a dose of measles or whatever. They just wouldn't leave it alone. But I just think that's the way they are, because there's a lot of right-wing people.
But I don't think I've read about this in The Guardian or The Mirror. I don't think I have.
Right, so it's not anywhere. Well, that is peculiar, it has to be said, because, I mean, I would feel very angry if it had happened to me. I mean, you know, I'm not just saying this about her because she's a Tory. I mean, if a Labour MP had done this, or any other party MP, it's quite appalling. You just can't go around making up falsehoods about your constituents and putting it on social media. It's absolutely outrageous, really.
It just is, isn't it? It just is. It's all very well me sitting here going, well, what am I missing? What's going on? It's just blimmin' shocking.
It is shocking, yes. I was quite shocked. I thought, blimey, you know.
I've presented the facts very honestly and very comprehensively, and every single person who's responded, with I guess one or two exceptions, simply suggesting that because all politicians are liars or because there's so much other news around, but no one is claiming that she's done something defensible. The opposite of defensible is indefensible. Indefensible conduct is at least grounds for examining or ultimately resigning. I think we might have over-egged it, actually. I wonder whether, actually, we're just in at the ground floor of this... Well, not the ground floor. The public have created the fuss about this story, using social media and other means. Lucy Allan's egregious dishonesty on social media has offended almost everybody that's heard about it. But the reason why my colleagues in the so-called mainstream media, if you want to sound like a tinfoil hat-wearing loon job, employ that phrase mainstream media as often as possible. But I know what is meant by it. It just means... people like me, they're not looking the other way or ignoring the story or convincing themselves it's not important. They're just not across it yet. I've just realised. I saw it on Twitter last night, looked it up and thought, my God. I texted the producer and said, we should do this tomorrow. And she texted back saying, yeah, crikey, it's astonishing. But of course, neither of us had seen it until that point. So maybe when we sit here going, why isn't everybody else as outraged as we are? It's simply, you're going, well, we weren't across it, James. And everyone who was across it was outraged. And now more people are across it. If only we had a political journalist in our pocket that we could talk to at this. Oh, hello, Theo Usherwood is here, the political editor of LBC Radio. But it is a story that I know you're across, because you've spoken to me about it. The Lucy Allan email, the Lucy Allan Facebook furore. I know you've been trying to get hold of her for us. Still not answering
Twice.
the phone. Twice.
No answer.
Twice. What else have you been doing? It's 5 to 1 in the afternoon. It's ridiculous.
No answer from our office, and we can't. Like I said, we can't get hold of her. I think just in terms of why this story may not have received the attention that it perhaps, as you say, it thoroughly deserves. Charlotte Leslie, the Conservative MP for Bristol West, she was threatened by a man called Craig Wallace, and it came out. The court case came out yesterday, and he said that he wanted to blow up her constituency office, and that drew a lot of attention in the press today. And then, of course, Hilary Benn, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, was last week threatened by one individual who said he could no longer walk through his home city of Leeds unprotected. But this Lucy Allan story is not per se by itself. It's not just a standalone story. I mean, there was also the Transport Minister Claire Perry last week, who called the police when there was an anti-austerity protest outside a supermarket in her home constituency, in her constituency of Devizes, and she called the police, and it was actually turned out a Labour councillor had simply tapped her on the shoulder, and she claimed assault and called in the police. So tensions are running very high. There's going to be a meeting in Parliament tomorrow between the Director of Security in Parliament, a guy called Paul Martin, and MPs. Every MP is being urged to attend to assess so that MPs can talk about the risks that they face and what they should do if they feel threatened.
And this casts a shadow over the notion of them reporting in good faith genuine threats that are being made, because this woman didn't.
No, and the idea is that she's taken these two quotes, and they've come from two different emails, and jammed them together and said, oh, it's all one thing.
But she's only proved the existence of one email.
And she hasn't even proven, as you say, she hasn't even proven the existence of it.
Your antennae twitching, Theo.
They are.
Mine are, furiously. Takes in Wimbledon. Last word on this, Jake. Go on, poo-poo the whole thing.
Hello, I'd just like to say that I don't condone it in any way, shape or form, but are we really surprised anymore?
I am. I'm shocked and stunned.
I am completely unsurprised by this.
You cynical soul.
There are bigger lies, and they might not necessarily class them as lies. They might call them U-turns, so to speak, or parties.
I mean, you don't stop prosecuting people for punching other strangers in the street just because there's murders going on, do you?
No, most definitely not. Most definitely not. It's just another opportunity for other members of the backbenchers to point score against the opposition, make everyone look silly.
I disagree.
And no wonder why the youth of today no longer wish to register to vote.
Well, there might be something in that, but that makes it all the more important to stand up and call out the dishonesty and call out the lack of integrity and call out the apparent deceit. She says she's a victim of an abuse campaign and has contacted Scotland Yard. So I'll bring you some updates on that investigation tomorrow, if there are any to bring you.